Recession by fire or drowning? Look at some AI economic predictive models. Hello, this is ChartGPT. Today, there are a lot of people talking about recessions coming, some bombastic predictions, etc., etc. Some people think it's going to be a great year. Let's take a look at some models and see where we might going. We've got some AI models I'd like to share with you. First off, let's take a look at the expectations. Here's arguably the most widely anticipated recession in history, up to 44%. Take a look at these other highs here. Sometimes it was true, sometimes it was true. More often than not, it was true. Sometimes there were like extenuating circumstances, the dot-com bubble and the COVID situation there. It was kind of a unique situation. So we'll see where this one goes here, whether or not the predictions become true or false. So when you look at the stock market, it's hitting new highs. Everybody thinks everything's great. Well, not really. It's really 7 stocks. Everything else is pretty much flat. So, and if you look at it on an inflation-adjusted basis, even worse. The other head scratcher is U.S. confidence is sinking, going down, where spending, it just keeps going up. So people, even though they're not confident, they're spending like crazy. Of course, again, that's an effect of the inflation. People are spending because they have to spend. Here's kind of an interesting chart where someone has overlapped the period of the 1974-1982. A lot of people have made a correlation here. That was the last time we had these kind of inflation spikes. I remember during the Carter years from 73, 74 had that initial spike, and then by the time 1980 came around, before Volcker came in and put the kibosh on it, it's pretty much tracking. So there's like the first wave, second wave. Most people call it a 3-wave. The first finer wave was in 69, and then in 74 there's like 3 waves. If we're in the first wave, we got a long way to go. It could be even worse. Anyway, that's an interesting point there. And a lot of times we look at the CPI versus the M2. The M2 is a money supply. That, by the way, there's different. It's a proxy for, and they don't track the M3 anymore, as some people do on a privatized base. I think Shadow Stats does. So anyway, the point is that M2 and CPI track pretty close. So the reason they brought the inflation rates down is because they've lowered the M2, and they've done that through higher rates, which is their primary tool to control money supply. So we're going to take a look at 3 things: the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, the M2, monetary supply, and gross domestic product. And we're going to try to compare those 3 and kind of create a little sub-miniature economic model and see how it works, positive or negative, whether we die by fire or die by drowning. Let's take a look at them. A couple of formulas here. These are really basic formulas. Value of money equals the GDP divided by the monetary base. You grow the monetary base without the GDP. Obviously, you reduce the value of money, i.e. inflation. And the GDP growth is the money supply growth minus inflation. If you grow the monetary supply by 10%, inflation is 10%. You make 10% more, but your net is 0 because the inflation eats up whatever you've gained. Of course, a lot of people already know that. Anyway, that's going into that. So here's a couple models here. This first model is targeting an economy with a 2.5% GDP growth rate, and so then we say, okay, if we're going to get the GDP down to 2.5, what is the resulting M2 in inflation? Well, of course, a lot of people don't care about M2, but inflation you do. And so the CPI there is we're going to be targeting we're going to be approaching, if we're going to hang on to the 2.5 GDP growth, we're going to be having an inflation. So this is the recession by fire. So yes, you may have some growth. It won't be a technical recession, but you're going to have more inflation, which is approaching the 15%. So whatever inflation rate you saw in the 22 period, it's going to be significantly higher. Well, let's target an economy with a 2% inflation rate. And what is the resulting M2 versus the GDP? But here you can see the GDP begins to fall off dramatically, which means obviously you're in a technical recession. So this is a recession by drowning. So basically what you got here is a whack-a-mole. You can sit there and play with these numbers. And the Fed is sitting there with all the levers, like kind of the proverbial man behind the curtain. They can make the economy go strong, but then you're going to have inflation. If you don't want inflation, then if you don't want inflation, then you're not going to have GDP. So which do you want? It really becomes a political decision by the Fed. And of course, we have just made the predictions here that they're going to drop the Fed rate to, i.e., grow the monetary base with lower interest rates right before the elections, before they take them off again. So this is why we're kind of targeting on this. And we weren't the only one thinking that. We've been saying this for probably 6 months, or almost a year even. Tucker Carlson finally came out and says, is Joe Biden trying to rig the Fed in order to get the economy going to get himself reelected? Yeah, perhaps. A lot of this has been going, these kind of charts have been going on for years, so interesting point there. Take a look at the AI, get a little more detail on those formulas, and take our online poll. Are we going to have a recession by fire, drowning, or none at all? In any case, don't forget to subscribe.